actually identify more with the gender that is opposite to the sex that they were assigned by their parents when they were very young. And that creates a lot of problems when it comes to identification cards. We haven't dealt with specific cases of intersex persons trying to get hold of identity documents before. But what I will say is that these cases do exist and they lead to a lot of complications later in life. I think this is a place where you see a lot of problems that many intersex persons suffer to go through, and there's a lot of work to be done. Thankfully, there are organizations who are working on these issues. Most of them are intersex organizations and trans organizations. We also have a lot of support from MP Mwaura in the National Assembly, as well as efforts to document the needs of the intersex community and the challenges they face by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So these are the entities that we work with to resolve these identification issues and other forms of violence and discrimination that members of the intersex community go through. Are we going well?
Yeah.
Okay. Have there been any cases on intersex? Right? Let me just drink some water. You know, talking, it makes you very tired.
Yeah, that's dry.
Yeah, you dry a lot. Let me just take a short break. Well, Sorry, I'm just kind of like. This is a really good interview. I'm really thankful.
I understand you're also busy.
It's not that like I feel like I need to take some time off and kind of like because I'm a lawyer and talking about the cases is gonna kind of like take some time. When are you thinking of like completing this?
Once they call me, the doctors.
You don't need to talk about like you can find intersex people without going to.
Okay, no, for you, I want you promised that you get the intersex community. So once I get the intersex community, I'll be free. For the doctors, just because of their professionals, they
oh yeah, they have their own rules. Yeah, that's true. I think I'm ready to go again.
Okay.
Actually, let me just get the correct citation on the cases. Case can. Are you working with anyone on this project?
No. I'm just alone. Maybe meanwhile if I get people, it's when I have a bulk, something that is bigger. Maybe something that needs extra cameras, and also the interview and the interviewer must be seen. Something also.
Ni nani? Fellow ni wewe? Who's that?
It's Mama Chai, in our kitchen.
Oh. petition. So, okay. Have there been any cases on intersex? So, there have been 2 cases that cover intersex rights issues in Kenya. Number one came out in 2010. The case is known as RM versus the Attorney General and 2 others. And that was decided by okay, can I just... I think we're just gonna have to start again. I've forgotten if it's the High Court or the Court of Appeal. Oh, okay, so let me start again and also put my phone away. So there have been 2 cases that cover intersex rights issues.
Okay, we start with the definition, what is the intersex, and then how common is the intersex, and how you know that a person has the conditions of intersex. Go on.
Okay.
Yes.
So you are ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So is that position for me okay?
Yes. Yeah, yes.
That position is okay.
Yeah, that position is okay.
Yeah. So intersex is a condition where an individual is born with genitalia which can neither fit the typical male genitalia or the female genitalia. So usually we call it ambiguous. So you can't place them and say this is a woman or this is a man, okay? And sometimes this may be evident at birth or much later in life when they have grown up. Yeah.
How common is intersex?
It's really a rare condition because this is one of those inborn conditions. So the typical prevalence would be something less than 1%, or probably like 1 in 1,000 or 2,000 people. So ranging between less than 1% to 0.05, yeah, of the general population.
How do you know that a person has intersex conditions?
Usually, as I said, this might happen immediately at birth when a baby is born. You know, we are excited, so we'll ask, is this a baby boy, baby girl, you know? So we have to check. And when we check, sometimes we are confronted with a picture which puts us in dilemma. So when you look at what the baby has, you can neither say this is a boy or a girl. It looks weird. So that is the time we may make that diagnosis. Although sometimes, as I said, it might be much later when now you look at the physical appearance of the individual and you tend to find if it's a lady, they appear to look like a man. So that would make you ask some questions. Why is this person who has been raised as a woman appearing like a man, or behaving like a man, or has features that seem to suggest they are more of a man than a woman?
Are you aware about the intersex society?
Really, in this country, it's not very prominent society, I would say. I think it's not been very active, so not many people are aware of that society, if it is there. Yeah. And personally, I've not had an interaction with the intersex society. Yeah.
How can you compare, how have the intersex been traditionally been treated compared to now?
Well, I think there is more debate now. We tend to see people discuss a little bit about it now than before. And what I would say is that there's more awareness about that problem now than before. And so In the traditional society, I think this would probably have been taken as a taboo, and so not many people were free to talk about it, and these people were hidden. But I think right now they are more or less actively involved in the community, in the society, and maybe sometimes queries would probably arise depending on what activities they engaged in. For instance, in sports, we've seen queries about some sports women, about their gender because of their physique and maybe prowess, okay? So that becomes a question. But in the clinical setting, we tend to see these situations when they come up specifically in relation to fertility concerns. That sometimes you may find a lady presenting to the clinic with the desire to conceive. She has all along known she's a woman, but when you do a clinical assessment, then you find she has features that would seem to suggest she's a man. So now that becomes a new issue which she has to deal with, because she has all along known that I am a woman. But on assessment, as a clinician, you feel she has features that suggest she's more of a man. And therefore, you have to take her through counseling and then provide the other necessary clinical support that can be given.
What do you do when you encounter an intersex?
Sorry. You can probably just...
Oh.
Yes, if you can come again.
What do you do when you encounter a patient with intersex?
When we do encounter these people, one of the things we want to find out is which would probably be their more formative biological gender. So, one, we do a clinical assessment, and then we may do some imaging, and we may do some laboratory tests to try and place them where we think they best fit. So if one is probably raised as a woman, and on assessment we find she has what would suggest she's a man, then our goal is to try and see how best to support them clinically so that they live their lives well as women, rather than to convert them from a woman to a man now, okay? And so that would involve a number of interventions. Some could be surgical, and some could just be additional counseling, because as I said, they've all along known that they are women, and so the issue of being told that you may be having what in your body makes you more of a man is quite puzzling. And usually what we are concerned about mostly is the sex organs, especially the gonads. And what you'll find is that in many of these situations, sometimes the gonad could be that of a man, a testis. And the testis in a woman is not what we would like her to ideally have, because it is prone to developing cancer. So one of the things we would like to do is probably to remove that particular testis and then give her hormonal support and any other surgical intervention, as I say, that would allow her to live her life more or less fully as a woman rather than as a man. Yeah.
How can you assign a gender, boy or girl, without a surgery?
Well, as I said, gender is usually assigned. The best time to assign gender is at birth. And so, any child who is born is examined and a determination made as to what is the best gender to suit that particular child. But sometimes these things may be overlooked. Probably a child is not examined properly or is born at home and they present to us in adulthood. But the best time to assign gender is at birth. And so we assign gender based on clinical findings, laboratory tests, and sometimes, as I said, we may need to do some other investigations to properly come up and say this is a man or this is a woman. Sometimes it could involve chromosome mapping, because it may not be very clear what you are dealing with. So you may need to do karyotype and looking at the chromosome types that you have, then you will see the genetic sex, is that of a man or is it that of a woman. But what we tend to find is that with ambiguous or intersex condition, it is easy to come up or support the female gender than the male gender. For instance, supposing you find what you have, the genitalia is not well developed to support a man. It is very difficult to do reconstruction, surgical reconstruction, to end up with what would give you the male gender. So many times we counsel parents to adopt the female gender because it is easier to support surgically and even deal with clinically.
What evidence is there that you can grow psychologically healthy with intersex genitals?
There's a lot of evidence because there are people who we already know of intersex condition, and they are living productive lives. They are going about their normal activities, and they have a role to play in society because they are normal human beings, apart from the limitation of the ambiguous genitalia. So, as we do know, in society people do have various forms of disabilities, but society has accepted them and has supported them so that they are productive. So the focus should not really be on the disability, but on what role that individual can play productively in the community to promote growth of the society and individual happiness. So it is very possible that a person of intersex gender can lead a healthy life despite the physical limitation they might be having.
Are there medical risks associated with the intersex conditions?
Yes, there could be some risks, as I had earlier alluded to. For instance, in some of these situations, we may be having what we call hormone disorders. For instance, you can have a gland that is probably not producing adequate amounts of certain hormones or certain excess hormones, and these hormones, when they are in excess, that a patient or the individual will end up with certain complications. Sometimes the presence of these organs, for instance, a testis located within the abdomen, is likely to become cancerous. So what we'll do is to assess the individual as a whole and define what hormonal abnormalities they have and be able to address those. But on top of that, if they have organs, like as I said, the testis, which is located in the wrong place, then probably it needs to be taken down to the right place, okay, or probably removed altogether. So there will be definite medical risk. The other thing is that given this is an abnormality of formation which occurs while the baby is growing in the womb, there usually is a possibility that you might find other associated organs in the body which did not develop well at the same time. So one of the challenges clinicians face is to do a proper assessment so that you are able to come up with the number of organs which are not well developed or that could be having issues, and they are also addressed at the same time, rather than just to focus on what you may have seen as ambiguous or weird looking genitalia in a child. Yeah. So you have to assess the child as a whole. When they are adults, for instance, you need to find out if there are certain excess hormones in the body, because those excess hormones could predispose them to certain conditions. So again, if they have certain excess hormones, whether they are androgens, then we need to see where is the source of these androgens and what can be done to lower those levels to what would be acceptable limits.
Are persons born with ambiguous genitals usually happy with their assigned sex?
Many of them will have been, of course, happy. They've been raised like that. I think, as I said, the key challenge is when now you may find a person grown up, who has grown up as a woman, is being told, now you are a man, okay? Or you've been a man. So that will be a bit unsettling, okay? But there will be cases where, for instance, if it's a boy who is born with genitalia that doesn't look like that of a man, they will not be happy, because maybe as they grow up, there's a lot of stigmatization at the community level. They can't play with the other boys well, okay? So they've probably been ridiculed and they'll be suffering psychological
Are persons with intersex conditions likely to display behaviors or interests that are typical for persons of their assigned sex?
Yes, as I think as I had alluded to earlier, it depends on what we are dealing with, what degree of ambiguous genitalia we have, okay? If, for instance, you have a woman who has been raised up as a man, okay, then they'll of course be displaying what is supposed to be feminine features and feminine behavior. But once in a while, because there is the male hormone in them, for instance, okay, then they'll have certain features or behaviors that seem to suggest that they are men. And that is how now we tend to term them intersex. We don't term them intersex just because of the genitalia alone. We term them intersex because also in terms of behavior, they may be exhibiting what looks like of the gender that is not assigned to them. Otherwise, if they are just behaving feminine in everything, then we would probably not be saying they are intersex. But it's because sometimes you see behavior that seems to suggest they belong to the other gender. And so, although this is not universal, it will apply to some people of intersex, but not necessarily all of them. Yeah. Likewise, you might also find men that have features that go beyond what we expect of a man. For instance, you might find a man with big breasts, you know, which is not what you expect to see in a man. Okay. Yeah.
Should children be left to make their decisions when they are old enough?
Well, I think children, as I've alluded to earlier, the easier thing is to probably assign them the gender of rearing. Okay? So when a child is born, did we say is a boy or it's a girl? If we say a child is a girl, then even in adulthood, they've always known that they are girls. So our role is to support them as girls. But you know, we've had situations where now adult men or adult women want to change their sex, okay? So a man says, I feel like I'm a woman and I want to become a woman. So the transgender issues. So again, as I said, it is easier to reconstruct a woman from a man, but it might be a bit difficult to create a man from a woman, okay? It's not easy, either surgically or even medically, because what we do know, supplementation with the male hormones has more side effects, okay, than supplementation with the female hormones. And number two, it is not easy to recreate the male external genitalia, okay, for a woman who wants to become a man. So how do we create for you something that will make you function? Because all in all, what you'll find, all these things again, we look. So why are we overemphasizing the sexual organs? It is because of the issue of sexual expression. These people will be involved in relationships, and so in terms of emotional satisfaction, they will need to have certain organs that allows them to express themselves sexually. So we do a lot of counseling, and so choice comes in, but more often we tend to go with, you've grown up knowing you are who, okay? So that is what we are going to support you on, because you're still going back to the same community. If you have been walking around, people know you as a woman, then you can't start walking around now you have converted to a man, okay, and vice versa. But we do know, as I said, right now we have situations of transgender, and these are not necessarily people of intersex. These are just people who have everything right for them either as a woman or everything right for them as a man, but they feel they belong to the other gender. So now they are making that choice. But I think traditionally what has been there is that people know their gender from birth, okay, as they have been raised up within the family, within the community. They have friends, okay, they are girls, they have girlfriends, if they are boys, they have boyfriends. So that is how we'll support them, okay.
How do hospitals handle intersex case? Is it made public or private?
Usually these are confidential cases, like any other medical case. You will not do disclosure to anyone unless they are involved in the care of that particular individual. So like for children, usually disclosure will be to the immediate parents once a child is born, and the clinicians and the nursing staff or whoever else is involved in care. They identify that what we have is ambiguous genitalia, as I said. Then we will disclose that information to the immediate family, okay, the mother and father, and then from there help them make a decision as to how best to rear that child, whether as a boy or as a girl, based on, as I said, the clinical assessment, laboratory tests, and the imaging that you have done. But for a client who presents to us in adulthood, as I said, you may be sitting in the infertility clinic and a lady walks in and says, I've been trying to conceive and I've not been able to conceive, and so I don't know what the problem is, and you do an assessment and you find this lady, okay, probably has an intersex condition, okay. So one thing you'll have to do is to disclose that information to her, okay. It will take a while before you do disclosure to the spouse, okay, but of course you will give disclosure, but probably it is the way, the language of communication that you might use, so that you do not break the relationship, because the purpose of disclosure is not to break existing relationships, but to just allow these people to live with the condition they have in a more positive way. So it may have to be that the man has to understand that the lady she has, given her biological status, it may not be possible for her to give birth, though she is married to him. So they'll have to look for other ways of getting a child, but biologically it may not be possible, because this lady who has grown up all along knowing she's a woman is a man, okay, but now has to be supported to live like a woman. So there will be that disclosure that will be done to the husband, okay, so that they can live positively together as a couple.
So what you mean is intersex cannot reproduce?
Well, it depends on what intersex you're dealing with, okay, and how functional are the gonads, okay. That's why I said you do a lot of assessment before you say they are able to reproduce or they may not be able to get a child. It depends, because as I said, if it's a woman who biologically actually is a man, then she cannot get a baby. She doesn't have a uterus to carry a baby, okay. When we do the scanning, we find she does not have a womb, and you're married to her, so she's not going to carry a baby for you, okay. And you've got to accept that, and she's going to accept that it will be impossible to carry a baby because she doesn't have a uterus, okay. But you may find other variations of the same thing. Maybe there was just some variation of the genitals outside, but the internal organs are okay, okay, the gonads are okay, okay, then that person might be able to get a child. So it depends on, after that evaluation, what have we come up with, yes, and what can it be able to give us biologically, yeah.
How was the government be able to protect their rights?
The government needs to protect their rights because sometimes they are abused, sometimes they are discriminated, they are shamed, people talk bad about them, and I think these are things we do know, they happen in the community. If they are sportsmen and sportswomen, they have to be allowed to participate actively in sports like other people, rather than be discriminated because of that physical situation they are in. So if I've always known I'm a woman, let me live my life as a woman, okay? Don't force me to now start living as a man, okay? And let me compete with fellow women rather than with fellow men, okay? When it comes to job opportunities, they should not be discriminated against, okay? And I think generally there isn't a lot of discrimination as such. What could be there is individually they are not sometimes comfortable with themselves, okay, and so they may suffer some shame, okay, and that may limit their physical interaction with physical, social and other interaction with other members of the community, okay. But we need to make them be proud of themselves, and when they are in relationships, we encourage partners to live with them and support them also, yeah. Sometimes you may find, like as I said, with issues to do with the fertility, there could be some violence, okay, some repulsion, okay, and lack of acceptance. If, say, you discover this is who my partner is, you don't feel closer to them anymore, but what you need is to be counseled, and many times you'll be able to live together comfortably, okay, because the physical emotional relationships, people will relate well as long as they've accepted their roles in the relationship, And I think maybe to push it a little further, you've seen even a man and a woman can live together in a relationship as long as they've accepted their roles. So as long as a woman has accepted their role in the relationship, she'll be able to live with their partner well and they'll be happy. As clinicians, our role is to see what medical interventions are available to make their relationships more meaningful and fruitful. Yeah.
Have you had a case of conflict of identification cards?
Conflict of?
Identification cards, e.g. this is male, female.
In terms of labeling or just somebody coming with an identity card which doesn't specifically state their gender.
Yeah, it says she's a female, this is a female, but they insist that this is a male.
Who insists?
Maybe the immigrations, or maybe somewhere there they're supposed to produce their ID. Like for example, when I was in high school, we had a boy, which was a boys' school, but a boy who used to act like a woman, and she looked like
she had the physical features of a woman,
physical features, until the educators had to insist that they had to confirm.
Yeah, sometimes that is necessary because it's a way to protect them. So if you have a place where you are isolating men on one side and women on one side, okay, and you have somebody you are not certain where they belong, then sometimes you might need to do some assessment, okay, to confirm who this person really is, okay. But those situations, as I said, they are rare. Maybe like for scenarios where you are dealing with somebody who looks like a woman and is with men, like the school, your fellow colleague you're talking about, then it is in their interest that you confirm who they are, okay? Otherwise they can be abused. Maybe sometimes people don't come out openly to say I'm a woman, okay? And so it would be in their interest to assign them the right gender, okay? But of course you have to work with them. So if you examine and you find this is a woman, but she insists I'm a man, you may not necessarily force them to accept that they are men or they are women. In day-to-day living, very few situations will arise. But I'll give you a good example. Let's say these people have done something and they are taken to a correctional institution. So if you take a woman to a man's jail, she can suffer physical harm, okay, inside that jail. So if you are in doubt, then the Correctional Services Department will have to assign you the proper gender and say, no, you are a woman and we cannot risk taking you to the male jails because the men can sodomize you, okay? Likewise, if you are a man, you cannot be taken to the women's side because you insist I'm a woman. If we assess you, and they can obtain court orders, okay? And this is in the context of public safety and individual safety, rather than to assign you a gender. Because once you come out, you live your life the way you want to live. We cannot dictate for you how or where you want to sleep, okay? If you want to sleep like a woman, yes, you sleep like a woman. If you want to sleep like a man, that's how you sleep. If you want to relate with other people, even if you are a woman, and you want to relate with other women like a man, then nobody is going to really go into that private life, okay? And as I said, we have people who have this behavior in the society. They are gays, they are lesbians, they are there, we know they are there. So we are not going to really interfere with their private life, okay? But our role is to support them to lead meaningful and productive lives in the community.
Do babies born with ambiguous genitals always need surgery immediately?
Probably not immediately, unless it depends on what we have assessed and we have found to be the scenario. Many times surgery in children, you can delay a little until they are probably above 1 year, okay? And the reason for this is usually sometimes to do with safety of the anesthesia. There's nothing urgent, I think. But if there is something that is life-threatening, medical condition that they have after assessment, say as I said, they have a certain hormone imbalance or deficiency, there's a certain hormone they are not producing enough, because those situations are there which now will present as intersex. Okay, you may find a baby girl born with the adrenal gland which is unable to produce a hormone we call cortisol. So they end up with a condition where they are producing more testosterone, okay, in an effort to make more cortisol. So that baby is born looking, the genitalia will look like that of a boy, okay? But on further assessment, you actually realize this is not a boy. So you have to correct that hormonal problem at that particular time. You cannot leave it to continue, okay? So it depends on what is really the problem at that particular time. But if they have no other problem, then there's a period to take the parents through counseling. As I said, many times as clinicians we are biased. Even if I find the boy genetically is a man, okay, but the genitalia doesn't support the features of a man, then I will try and counsel the parents that it may be difficult for me to create a shaft for this little boy. So we better fashion the female genitalia from what looks abnormal here, okay? And so that will take some time of counseling before there is acceptance and we are able to go ahead with the surgery. So this is not usually an emergency.
You give parents psychological support to make them decide whether that kid will be a male or a...
There is a lot of counseling that is needed because it is not an easy decision, okay? As I said, you may be converting somebody genetically supposed to be a man to a woman, okay? Because the genitalia you have cannot allow them to live as men. It's not well developed, okay? So there is a lot of counseling that is required. Likewise, as I said, if you find somebody who is a woman, all along has known I'm a woman, but now on your assessment this is actually a man, then they need counseling to accept that this is the truth, okay? And they'll have to live like that, okay? They may not be able to get a child, that sort of thing.
Okay, that's all I have. Unless
Yes.
you have something to add.
No, I think what we need to do is to highlight this problem more. I think the good thing right now is that many of our babies are increasingly being born in health facilities. And so what is important is for health workers not just to hand over the babies to the mothers, but to examine the babies properly. so that if the genitalia is ambiguous, we are able to pick the condition at that time and be able to address the problem early in life. The other thing is that for those in the community who have this problem, they don't need to be ashamed. They need to come forward to the health facilities, seek consultation from the clinicians and gynecologists, urologists. They'll be willing to assist, define the problem properly, and then give the necessary psychological and even clinical support that would allow them to live meaningful lives. So people should not hide, people should not be ashamed, and people should not discriminate against people who may be having intersex condition. They need to be accepted as our brothers, as our sisters. They did not choose to be born like that. It just happened, it's nature. And so natural things generally are beyond us as individuals, but for those involved, we need to give them support, both moral, physical, and psychological.
Actually identify more with the gender that is opposite to the sex that they were assigned by their parents when they were very young. And that creates a lot of problems when it comes to identification cards. We haven't dealt with specific cases of intersex persons trying to get hold of identity documents before. But what I will say is that these cases do exist and they lead to a lot of complications later in life. I think this is a place where you see a lot of problems that many intersex persons suffer to go through, and there's a lot of work to be done. Thankfully, there are organizations who are working on these issues. Most of them are intersex organizations and trans organizations. We also have a lot of support from MP Mwaura in the National Assembly, as well as efforts to document the needs of the intersex community and the challenges they face by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So these are the entities that we work with to resolve these identification issues and other forms of violence and discrimination that members of the intersex community go through. Are we going well?
Yeah.
Okay. Have there been any cases on intersex? Right? Let me just drink some water. Talking, it makes you very tired.
Yeah, that's dry.
Yeah, you try a lot. Let me just take a short break. Well, sorry, I'm just kind of like, this is a really good interview. I'm really thankful.
I understand you're also busy.
It's not that, like, I feel like I need to take some time off and kind of like, because I'm a lawyer, and talking about the cases is gonna kind of like take some time. When are you thinking of like completing this?
It depends. Once they call me, the doctors,
You don't need to talk about, like, you can find intersex people without going to
okay,
the,
no, for
yeah.
you, you promised that you get the intersex community. So once I get the intersex community, I'll be free. For the doctors, just because of their professional as they
Oh yeah, they have their own rules. Yeah, that's true. I think I'm ready to go again.
Okay.
Actually, let me just get the correct citation on the cases. Case can. Are you working with anyone on this project?
No. I'm just alone. Maybe meanwhile if I get people, it's when I have a bulk, something that is bigger. Maybe something that needs extra cameras. and also the interviewer must be seen. So it's 100%.